It's so great to be back at NASSCOM, and I love the theme this year, Reimagining the Art of the Possible. And I'm really excited to share some thoughts with you on what I call a radically human approach to innovation. This comes out of a lot of work that we're doing with our clients and around our company, and also a new book that I'm working on called Radically Human. And if you think about the context of what's happening, I think we all need to step back a little bit and look at some things that are happening in the world around us. And I boil it down to two big factors that are really causing us to rethink a lot of our assumptions. One of them is the exponential change, the exponential acceleration that we're experiencing, we continue to experience around technology and the new possibilities that that continues to create. And the other big factor is the pandemic and the degree to which that's really changed the way we think about and experience a lot of what's happening around us. And if you put those two factors together, I think what's happened is we've hit a giant fast forward button and we've fast forwarded all of ourselves into the future. And I call this the great acceleration. It's the great acceleration of how we're living our lives, how we're experiencing things, how our businesses are running. And this acceleration is what I'm going to talk a lot about in my comments today. But the challenge is not everyone is accelerating and not everybody's getting there at the same pace. And we have some data that really highlights it based on some research that we've done, starting several years ago before the pandemic and then, updating it more recently. If you go back a few years, what the research showed us is that the leaders in digital, the leaders in adopting technology, were outpacing the rest by a factor of 2x. That's dramatic in and of itself. And the reasons were because of the way that they were applying technology to their business and driving their business faster. What happened post-pandemic and after some of the other acceleration? The gap widened. The top 10% are outperforming the rest, not just by 2x, but now by 5 times. And we've also seen a new category of companies emerge, about 18% of companies that are leapfroggers, outperforming the rest by 4x and doing it by innovating faster. So how do these companies do this and what does this mean for all of us? The first thing is that you need a new mindset to deal with this. We need to think about what's happening in the context around this differently and deal with 4 new realities of the great acceleration. And that's what I'll really start with here in talking about. I'll go through them quickly, but there's 4 new realities I think we all need to just think about a little bit more and understand how we incorporate into our business. The first is the new reality of experience. And I mean here the human experience. Think about the pandemic. 8 billion people, billions of people around the world instantaneously changed their behavior because of one stimulus, the COVID pandemic in this case. That's never before happened in human history. That degree of change, that pervasive, that fast. We're still understanding what that means. Think about the increase in online commerce as one example, in-home delivery, online grocery shopping, telemedicine visits, all accelerating exponentially, again with accelerating, this great acceleration and changing the way we experience things. And every one of our businesses needs to think about that experience, and we need to have an experience sensing capability as well as experience baked into the technology approaches we use. So that's the first new reality. The second new reality is around technology itself. Technology was the lifeline during the pandemic. I think that's obvious to us all now, but it might not have been obvious at the time. If the pandemic happened just a few years earlier, it would have been far more catastrophic if we didn't have technology keeping us all together, keeping the world together, keeping the economies together in the way it did. And the reality of this, it means that every business is becoming a technology business. And the analogy I use, it's changing the role of technology in IT, itself, IT organizations. IT used to be the support crew, the roadies, that used to kind of set up the business, make sure everything worked okay, run things behind the scenes. So they were kind of the roadies, to use a rock concert analogy. Now, today, IT and technology are the star act, the center stage. It's what's driving business. And that's a big change in the role of technology that I'll come back to and talk a lot more about. The third new reality then is about work itself. Work has changed. That's obvious, to all of us now, but it's changed and needs to continue to change, not just to be location independent, but to become time independent, to become data driven, accelerated and shaped by metadata and automation that makes the work more human and more radically human in the way we operate. And then the fourth new reality, and sometimes a surprise when I talk about this one, but I think it's more evident to many of us, is sustainability. Sustainability needs to be part of the core of our thinking on everything we do in business and everything we do around technology. I think the recent COP26 event made this clear to many, and the increasing commitment coming from companies and coming from countries around sustainability. But it means a lot to us in technology for two reasons. One is that technology is, in many cases, the answer to solving sustainability challenges. We talk about sustainability being the new digital in the way that we need to incorporate sustainability into everything we do. The second reason why sustainability is so important to all of us in technology is that technology also is the problem for sustainability in many cases. But just about a decade ago, technology, information technology, ICT, represented about 1% of global emissions. Today, that's 4%. By 2040, it's projected to be 14%. 14% of global emissions. We need to make technology more energy efficient. Green IT and leading innovations around that are essential for us to accelerate, again, as we move to the future and incorporate into everything that we do. All right, so those are a lot that I just talked about around these new realities to think about. And that's kind of the what. So if that is the what we need to think about, you may ask, how do I then do it? How do I do this great acceleration, and what does it mean? And what I'd suggest to you is that we need to reframe our thinking and think very differently about some aspects of technology than we have before. And to make this easy, I've packaged these 5 changes into something you can remember called IDEAS. IDEAS, a 5-part little framework that I'll talk about on how to reframe our thinking from where we may have been to where we need to get to. So let me talk about each one of these 5 things very briefly to bring it to life a little bit. The first part, the I in IDEAS, is intelligence. And this is talking about artificial intelligence and moving from the artificial to human in the way we apply AI. We just completed some research that showed that only 8% of companies are really applying AI at scale in a way that's integrated with their business, only 8%. So there's a lot more to do with AI, with machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, et cetera. But at the same time, we also need to look at incorporating new AI innovations and techniques into our solutions. Things like emotional AI, common sense AI, new approaches. And the message here is to not look at where AI has been, but to look at where AI is going in applying it to your business. And increasingly, it's about the more human applications of artificial intelligence and amplifying human interaction, amplifying our human productivity and characteristics in the way we apply AI. And that's the reframing and change we're talking about with intelligence. The second part of the IDEAS framework is around data. And this is a big one. We're talking about from approaches that think about the maximum of data, going to minimum data, and then maybe back again. So from max to min and back as we think about data. What do we mean by that? The petabytes of data, the billions of parameter GPT, transformer models, yes, they're important. But increasingly, the differentiation around what we do with data is going to come from smaller data, not just the bigger data. Data that's at the edge, where we process the smaller data at the edge, on the phone, at the device, in the factory, and drive insights at that point. And that's talking about smaller data. Also data that's not necessarily massive data sets, but smaller amounts of data that represent the special characteristics of your business or your customers that'll help you really drive differentiation and advantage. And that's what we mean by minimum data in addition to maximum data. And the third one is experience. And the best way for me to show you this is for you to take a trip with me. So why don't you come with me to the metaverse? Well, here we are. We made it to the metaverse. You heard me talk earlier about reframing possibilities, the transformation, the way we think about experience, and the metaverse does that to a level beyond what you could imagine, and that's why I really wanted to show it to you firsthand. So I'm here with my good friend Jason, and Jason's been at the heart of what we're doing around the metaverse. I think you may spend a lot of time in the metaverse. Why don't you tell us more about where we are?
Absolutely, and I love your avatar, Paul. Super cool. It looks just like you. So we're in Accenture's corner of the metaverse. We call this the nth floor, and we're actually in one of the spaces we call the lounge. And so as you can see, we've got areas for people to gather from all over the world. But I always love the games in the back. There's basketball. There's a coffee bar. There's even a bar upstairs. I think we played basketball together there before, haven't we, Paul?
Yeah, I got in trouble for playing basketball during our last meeting, so I'll stay away this time. This is a great space, but tell us more about what we do here and what you think the potential is about for immersive experiences in the metaverse from a business perspective?
One of our best examples right now is the way that Accenture brings our new joiners into the company. We do that in a space we call One Accenture Park. It allows people from all over the world to gather as teams and go through a shared experience to learn all about what they'll be doing at Accenture. We've created another similar, much larger space that includes all kinds of different subworlds, and people are having a blast with it, but more importantly, they're learning all about the culture of Accenture.
Yeah, and we've spent a lot of time here together, Jason. We've been here with some of our new joiners, as you said, and there's 60,000 of them equipped with this technology. We've spent time with clients and gone to many of our other locations around the world for these types of meetings. And I think what's exciting is, you can live in these virtual worlds, but the business impact is so much greater. It's about new digital properties and new digital assets through things like non-fungible tokens, new forms of commerce, new forms of identity through blockchain and such, then enabled into the metaverse. And it's about bridging the virtual world into the physical world and the real world, so you could have be working in the metaverse and maybe controlling a factory and your equipment and your supply chain and such. And that's why I think the potential is just so vast. And again, back to our theme, it's about reframing our thinking. So thanks, Jason, for taking some time with me today.
Thanks for coming to the nth floor.
Okay. And now let's go back to reality and back to me. Well, back to reality with all of you. And more to come on the metaverse, but my message would be, now is the time to start thinking about, planning for, and acting in the metaverse. Now, the next area, the fourth area of ideas, is architecture. And here we're talking about from legacy to living systems. And the key point that I'd make to you is architecture matters. How you build it matters. This hasn't been as important in the past to many. It was more about how do we use technology to get the job done. But how do we build the architecture? How do we make it adaptable? How do we make it extensible? How do we allow partners to interact with us? How do we make the experience optimal for our consumers? The how of how the architecture works, how the products interact is critical, and those decisions are critical. And that's what we're talking about here. How do you build systems that are boundaryless, adaptable, and radically human, which is the way we define living systems and how they come together? Think about things like, example like Starbucks and what they've done with their technology. Starting in the pandemic, when everybody was shutting down, Starbucks was able to take a different approach. They created new experiences, new online ordering experiences, and pushed it out to millions of customers through their app. They had an API, microservices architecture, so that they could quickly create new delivery experiences to get their product to consumers in a new way, and therefore, run their business differently, adapt in this boundaryless fashion that I talked about with a human focus, and drive their business forward. And that's what we're talking about as we think about architecture and the ways in which you leverage all the different elements of technology to make that work. The foundations of the cloud, the applications you've built, the new development techniques, the agility, the product centricity, et cetera. And the fifth component that you need to rethink is strategy and how you do strategy. And the message I'd give you here is we're all technology companies now, and as a result, strategy needs to be approached differently. In what way? Strategy needs to be integrated with the business and together. Maybe not a new concept, but essential to get right now. Strategy needs to be continuous. It's not about developing the strategy and executing. It's about continually adapting and having an agile, adaptable strategy itself. And it's about a radically human approach where you understand the human impacts, customers, partners, your employees, et cetera, and what role that all plays in taking your strategy forward. I think a good example of this is, think about Moderna, who've all come to know a lot better based on what's happened over the last few years. A key part of their success with the COVID vaccine has been the way they went about the technology. They had their drug discovery studio based in the cloud, using artificial intelligence, partnered in a radically human way with their scientists for clinical trials, experimentation, et cetera, so that they could drive the experimentation process on a new science of messenger RNA to get a drug to market in unprecedented time. And I think that's an example of running the business in a very different way. So how will you do your own great acceleration? In the work we do at Accenture and with all of our clients, I'd suggest it really is pretty simple. It comes back to thinking about the 4 new realities, and are you really incorporating that in the way you're dealing with today and thinking about tomorrow? And think about the 5 ideas, trends, and reframing your thinking about approaching these areas differently as you move to the future. So as I wrap up, let me leave you with some words that really had an impact on me. And they're from Amanda Gorman, a poet who wrote the following in a New Year's poem at the start of this year, New Year's 2022. So let us not return to what was normal, but reach toward what is next. I hope my comments today help all of you reach toward what is next. So thanks for listening, and back to you, Shreya.
Ending on a poetic note, thank you, Paul, for that wonderful overview on embedding human centricity in our tech innovation. Two factors that are causing us to reimagine are exponential change in technologies and the consequences of the pandemic. We really need to deal with the four new realities of the great acceleration: human experience, technology, work, sustainability. My favorite. And we definitely need to reframe our thinking through IDEAS, ideas, intelligence, data, experience, architecture, and strategy.